Hey everyone, I'm Philip, and once again, thank you for checking out my motivational YouTube series called How to Fly with a Clipped Wing. I spent some time in my last video telling some stories that gave you some more background information. This video picks up where that last video left off from, so it's really important to watch that one before continuing with this one in order to get the gravity of what this video will talk about. This video also gets into what happened during the motorcycle accident, the rise of my anger, depression, and erratic behavior, going through major surgeries, and the role that my mom played in my recovery. As I said before, my dad's health was getting ready for a sharp decline, a surprise to all of us. In early January 2005, my dad's health took a turn for the worst, starting with severe shortness of breath and unsettling fatigue. He came in, he laid down, and a few hours later, the heart attack sunk its fatal claws into him. The paramedics came and tried to revive him right there in the hallway, and then took him in an ambulance to the hospital to try again. He did not make it. One of my best friends, my mentor, the guy who taught me to surf, to ride motorcycles, who taught me to be confident in myself and not give up, who spent hours with me building model airplanes and who I dreamed about flying with someday, was gone forever. From that point on, both riding motorcycles and surfing were more than things that defined who I was. They were things that brought me closer to the essence of the bond that I shared with my dad. Things that helped me cope with his death. And after he died, my mom moved back up to Torrance from where she was living at the time in San Diego. She switched gears to take care of me and my younger siblings right away and dealt with a ton of financial bullshit that I'm still in awe that she was able to deal with as time went on. I kept riding and kept surfing, missing my dad more and more every day. Sometimes, especially as I was riding, I would tear up just the thought that he was the one who made this and so many other things in my life possible. And I would need to pull to the side of the road and step off my bike and let my eyes dry before continuing on. Rides through the Malibu canyons without him were never the same. However, as time went on, I could feel the riding, the surfing, and the physical activity really starting to help with the coping, as I was able to carry with me so many lessons he taught me, and I seem to almost be able to relive certain memories at times. Fast forward 1 year to 2006. I'm a senior in high school, 17 years old. Part of it was spent in special needs remedial classes just because I just wasn't learning. And the other part of it was spent at home on what's called independent study, which is like take-home schoolwork. I was barely able to graduate, but I was able to walk in the grad ceremony after all. I thought that I had come super close to not being able to walk at graduation that year, given my horrific grades, but I had absolutely no idea how lucky I was to walk at graduation at all until that fateful day in March 2006. I was on my motorcycle riding home from visiting some friends down in San Diego when a truck ran through a red light into me, hit me directly from the side. I flew off and I came down landing on my neck and suffered a spinal cord injury that forever changed my life. When I landed on my neck, I could feel and hear the nerves rip and tear because the trauma happened right in here. So it's like really close to the ear. My arm was immediately numb and warm and completely unresponsive when I tried to move it, or my hand or my fingers. And I had been in lesser motorcycle accidents before, for sure. I had broken bones before, and I knew right away that even though I couldn't move my arm, this was no broken bone. Originally, the doctors were perplexed because other than my arm not working at all, I had nothing else wrong with me. I was barely cut at all from during the actual impact, and I actually remained conscious through the entire thing and even walked out of the middle of the street after I hit the ground, although I had to cradle my dead arm while doing it. They were perplexed because what happened was a very, very rare type of spinal cord injury where some of the roots of the nerves that are normally embedded in the spine and then they run throughout, your whole body, those roots got pulled out. Kind of like when pulling a plant out of a pot and the roots come with it, where normally a nerve is severed instead. But this trauma, like 99% of the time, results in either, first of all, death, because that kind of stress on the neck just snaps it, or, you're for sure paralyzed from the neck down, or something like that. There's usually a lot of seriously debilitating mental damage done as well. And here I was fully able to walk around and think and still completely communicate. I had no internal bleeding, no broken bones. I basically won the spinal cord injury lottery if you look at the odds. Just incredible. So, doctors, even from the very beginning, were like, all right, we aren't able to fully diagnose the actual extent of the trauma at this time, but we do know that this is extremely serious and you could either amputate now or likely amputate later. I was 17 years old and not even an hour or 2 hours after the accident when I'm being told this. Could you imagine? Of course I'm not going to amputate my arm, you cold-hearted bastard. You just told us that this was not fully understood. Traumatizing. So anyway, that really added to this whole thing really messing me up on top of the excruciating pain that felt like my arm was slowly getting ripped out of its socket, medieval torture style kind of, even though it looked on the outside like it was completely normal, aside from it not moving at all. As time went on, the trauma from all of this, the unyielding burning nerve pains, and now basically, being physically unable to do things that helped me cope with my dad's death, that were also fundamental to my sense of identity, no longer, being able to do these things sent me off to a very bad place, mentally, emotionally, and physically. A bad place that, at that time, and from that point on, for the next few years. With my arm in an arm sling, where it would remain for 6 years after that point, the pains would keep me up all night, feeling like my arm was being compressed to the bone in a vice or something like that. I remember crying and screaming into my pillow many, many, many nights, expending tons of energy until finally my body would shut down and force itself to go to sleep in the early morning after long nights of my body fighting with itself, essentially. This screwed up my appetite, screwed up my energy. It made me so angry and erratic. I mean, I was like nitroglycerin, where it would take next to nothing at all to set me off. I pushed people away from me who I loved and who I needed in my life, especially at that point. I would explode on my mom over nothing and be utterly disrespectful, cursing at her, even to my own little grandma, during holiday dinners that year. The girl I was dating at the time is someone who I also pushed away until our bitter breakup. It all finally came apart one night. I pushed my sister after she had provoked me. And that same night, I had to be escorted out of my house by the police. From that point on, for almost a year, I was out on my own. I was working as a real estate appraiser and just going day to day, really. Still blaming everything else and everyone else around me for the situation that I was in. Blaming everything except myself and the way that I had been treating people as a result of this gnarliness that had happened to me. I was alone in every sense of the word, moving from place to place, staying on a couch in my friend's garage at one point, renting rooms. And it was during this time, shortly after that I started hanging around a girl that got me into really, really serious drugs that I'll talk about in the future, in a future video where I can expand on it more. But depression took over as I had alienated myself from most people in my life. There seemed to be no way out and no end in sight. I was still angry, still hurting in every sense imaginable. This was my rock bottom. And at a certain point, however, in this rock bottom time, I started looking around me thinking, you know what? I hate my job. I'm disgusted with this situation. I'm disgusted at how angry I've been and how much energy I had spent placing blame on everything around me. I'm disgusted with how lonely I've made myself. I'm over it. One of the best days of my life happened toward the end of this rock bottom period of time when a girl I had dated a while back and a close friend of mine called me up to check on me. She had heard what I had just went through and, with the accent and everything, and was calling just to be supportive. But this absolutely blew me away and took me completely by surprise because we hadn't talked in years. And I absolutely adored her, even from back when we met in middle school. So to hear her voice completely rejuvenated me and really helped seal the deal when it came to me realizing how important loved ones in life are, especially in a situation like what I was in. As I talked more and more with her, the walls around me of anger and depression began to break down. We started dating soon after, and she's been through everything with me to this day. At this time, I knew it was time to change, starting with apologizing to my mom and coming back home to begin a long, long journey of repairing the bridges that I had burned. My relationship with my mom got a lot better, and she worked tirelessly to find the right doctors for us to go visit. She ended up finding a team of surgeons in St. Louis, Missouri that were really interested in working with me for research purposes since my condition was so rare. We flew over there and got checked out, and I agreed to a series of 2 clinical trial nerve reconstruction surgeries that would take place over 2.5 years or so, since nerve tissues take a super long time to heal compared to bones or something that can heal rather quickly. I'll talk about the surgeries and the tests and everything in more detail in another video specifically about that, but yeah, these 2 surgeries were pretty crazy. We actually got my arm to work a little bit. Very, very significant considering the nerves were completely pulled out of the spine. My mom worked her ass off researching and worked in order to pay for what we needed to pay for these surgeries. She was there with me every step of the way, and so was my girlfriend. During this time, as I mentioned, I had grown fed up with my job. The repetitiveness of it wasn't at all what I wanted to do before I had lost my way. So I decided to try school again and see where it would take me. I thought, I might as well, especially with the downtime between these major surgeries, right? I might as well do this. Even though I knew that this was probably the best way for me to regain control of the direction of my life, I was incredibly scared because of how poorly I had done in school up until that point. I remember standing in front of my mom and crying to her, telling her, "Mom, I can't do this. I'm not smart enough." And she was the one who grabbed me and hugged me and told me that she believed in me and that she knew that I could do it. My girlfriend was also so critical for giving me the confidence I needed to go through with it because she was an incredible student and she was so intelligent and clever. I've always admired that about her. So I had a lot of help to go through with this in order to find my own way from there. Once I started taking classes, I found myself becoming more and more open to new experiences. Eventually, my inhibitions subsided, and I gradually let more and more of my guard down as I went through school. I saw my grades improve. I got involved in a lot of extracurricular stuff, eventually making it into UC Berkeley. And at that point, I don't want to say that I couldn't believe it because of all the hard work I had spent over almost 3 years to turn my grades around and transfer over there. But there was definitely a part of me that was so surprised at the turnaround that was possible once I was able to let things go and get myself back on track. Over the years while going through school, I had the second nerve surgery, as well as other surgeries that tried to repair my shoulder and strengthen it because of all the muscle loss that had gone on as a result of the paralysis. You can even see it's kind of like, there's not a lot of muscle around it. Ultimately, though, the deterioration caught up to me and the arm was in such unimaginably bad shape. My shoulder still dislocated on its own just from the weight of the arm. I couldn't sleep due to nerve pains just as before, but now there was added joint, arthritis pains from my shoulder doing that, and from my wrist locking up and my elbow locking up. My fingers tightened and couldn't be flexed. There was basically zero muscle on the arm. just skin and bones, honestly. I'm surprised I was able to even hold out for as long as I did with the arm and was still able to graduate from university, because my school is it was very hilly. There's a lot of hills there. So walking around was absolutely torturous, and I required a lot of rest, frankly. I managed to graduate in 2012, but in August of that year, I had reached my absolute limit with the arm failing and in the ways that it was failing. The whole series of events and my mentality and everything involved with the decision to amputate is something I'll talk about in a separate video, because there's really so much really important stuff to talk about. But essentially, I had enough of how much life this arm was draining out of me by the minute. So I elected to have it amputated in October 2012. It was easily the best decision I've ever made, for sure, and really the starting point for not a new chapter in my life, but basically the starting point of a whole new book, to take the metaphor, a step further. I'll talk about my amputation and life after the amputation in part 3 of this episode in the next video. But for now, I'd like you to walk away from this video thinking about a few different lessons that I learned throughout this turbulent time of extreme changes. First of all, happiness and identity come from within. The more that I shifted my focus away from what I had lost and instead towards what I still had to work with, the fact that I was still alive, and for that reason change was even physically possible, the more eligible I was to adapt to my surroundings and do what I needed to do to try new things and find a sense of purpose and identity in other things. Secondly, I learned the power of forgiveness, both from how my mom was able to forgive me and work with me to restore a new life for me, and me forgiving myself for who I was and knowing that I didn't ever want to allow myself to get to that point again. No one deserves the ways I was making others feel terrible, and I didn't deserve being my own worst enemy. In my opinion, forgiveness can be thought of as a first step in the direction towards moving on with your life. The third thing is not just don't take life for granted. It's much more than that. It's realizing that the power of your mind is so great and so immense and can lead you down some of the most marvelous and enlightening paths in life, as long as you do everything you can to not take life and time for granted, and as long as you try and try and try to be as self-aware as possible. Even if you're surrounded by people who you could swear don't like you or don't want you to succeed, the fact is that at the end of the day, if you don't make it, it's not because of anyone else other than yourself and the mental roadblocks that you set up in your own way. The more self-reflection you can have and being real with yourself and how you are impacting the things around you and how aware you are of bad habits you need to change and stop worrying about other people, you will see that in reality, if anyone is going to stop you from succeeding, it's going to be you. So, be the reason you succeed, not the reason you don't succeed. Lastly, I need to stress the importance of the support system. I talked about my mom and my girlfriend supporting me. My close friends were there too, visiting me in the hospital multiple times, talking through things with me, believing in me, really inspiring me to then go forward and take action on my own. If you have the opportunity to be that support system for someone, you gotta do it. You never know where that person will end up because of a single talk or gesture that you gave them in support of what they're going through. And I will see you guys in the next video.